Hi, my name is Denny Purvis, and before I take you on my journey through my skydiving experiences, I want to thank Jacques Estelle for his get-together there in Felicity and all the old-timers that showed up there. Some of them I remember, some I don't, but anyway, that was quite an experience, and I thank them. It all started in 1953. My brother and a friend joined the paratroopers. I was 17 years old. We went to jump school. First we went through Fort Campbell, Kentucky basic training, then went on to jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia. We all ended up back in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My brother and his friend became a rigger, and I guess that's the reason that we all started jumping again afterwards. My brother obtained a job at the Idaho Air National Guard in Boise as a rigger. One day he brought a couple of parachutes home to Salmon, Idaho, where we live, and asked if we wanted to jump. And I said, hey, that's a great idea. So all we needed now was a pilot and an airplane. So this gets kind of interesting. We run into a Mike Loaning, who had been searching around the country for a place to settle down and start a business. Well, it happened to be that his father was Grover Cleveland Loaning, and he worked for Orville Wright, had his own airplane company, sold the first monoplane to the government with wing struts you hang on a lot. He designed and built the first amphibious airplane and many other things. I have two books that he wrote and dedicated to me. One is called Take Off into Greatness, and the other is The Conquering Wing. The funny thing about the Take Off into Greatness, we were at the air races in Reno in '68. When he signed the book, he signed it in 1928. I don't know what he was thinking about. Anyway, those are items that I really cherish. But Mike and Grover and all of them became real close friends. Mike had a ranch 20 miles south of Salmon, Idaho, which I spent a lot of time at the ranch. We eventually taught Mike, my little sister, and we had one sister that never jumped, but my mother even made a couple of jumps, and this is a news clipping from my mother making 2 jumps on a T-10. And so we moved to Boise, where Mike also had a operation going called Loaning Air, and he had one of the old towers at the airport. It was kind of interesting. Mike and I flew all over the country together, and we started teaching students there in Boise, and we eventually obtained one of the barracks out at Gowan Field. We had the whole upstairs, had a packing table and a whole bunch of parachutes. I paid $14.95 a piece for 10 parachutes I got from Midwest Parachute Company, I believe it was. They were all white. We dyed them several different colors, and I have a picture of that that's kind of interesting. But at that time I started getting pretty heavy into it, and we thought we'd make some changes. We didn't like the way the reserve ripcord handle was on the old gut reserve, so we positioned it up on the top towards the right hand and just turned the cones 45-degree angles. It was very simple. One corner of the handle would go right underneath the end flap, which made it real safe. We never had a problem with it. It's funny that they went to all that trouble with the center pull. It cost quite a bit to do, and it was so simple to do it there where you could pull it with either hand if you needed to. Well, I got into modifying parachutes. I got a pair of scissors and I started cutting the heck out of parachutes and jumping one and another till one day I run into what I call the Crown 4, and it was so impressive that I thought I'd take it to Paraventures in Hollywood that was doing the ripcord program. As I throw it on the packing table there and everybody's looking at it, I think Jim Hall was there, Dick Dunphy was the rigger, and a couple of guys standing there watching it. One of them made a comment. He said, I wouldn't jump that thing, it's too radical. On the other hand, Dick Dunphy said, interesting. Well, I didn't realize it, but Lyle Cameron had walked in at that time. He was watching it. He tapped me on the shoulder and says, Denny, come with me, would you? So I said, yeah. I went down the street with him about a block into the restaurant. He introduced me to Jim Aaron, and he said, Jim is going to be the next world champion. I said, that's fine. He'd like to jump your parachute, see if he liked it. So we made arrangements to go to Lake Piru to make a couple of jumps. Jim had to go do something else, so he took off, and Lyle said, here, I want to take you over to another place. He took me over to Jim Render's place. It was about 10 miles or so away, I think. And Render was a rigger. He also did jumps with the Paraventures. he had made a harness for Aaron, a nice blue harness, pretty nice. And he took that to the Nationals with him. Eventually after that I went back to Boise. We started teaching students again. In fact, we even taught a special forces group, probably the first special forces group that was ever trained in jumping before they ever went to jump school. We got a letter from the commander in Fort Benning, Georgia, telling us what a great job we did. That was quite a feat. We taught several of the jumpers from the Air Force Base at Mountain Home. And one day I decided I wanted to move on a little bit, so I packed up my rigs and the packing table and I went to Idaho Falls, started teaching there, taught for a while. Then I ended up going back to Pocatello, where I'd gone to school before. So I went back to school at Idaho State for a short time. I eventually got bored with that and thought, well, I'll move to the Bay Area. And I did. I moved down there and I had a great time. I jumped with several groups down there. When I first got there, they said, don't go out and jump with that Shelbyville bunch. They drink wine and pass a wine bottle around in the airplane before they jump. Well, I didn't pay any attention to them, but I went up to Shelbyville. Come to find out they were a pretty good bunch of jumpers, some of the better jumpers I've jumped with for that era. We moved over to Calistoga eventually and jumped an awful lot at Calistoga. One day I decided I wanted to mess with the parachutes again, so Ed Noon's run the drop zone there. But I got this 28-foot flat circular and I cut a 28 or 58-inch apex in it. Normally it's 18 inches. I attached a cargo chute underneath it about 6 points so that when it opened, this cargo chute would go up and fill up that big hole. And I had a center line. All you have to do is pull down on the center line and open that big hole up so that you could increase the downward speed, which should increase the forward speed. And much to my surprise, I jumped out. I thought maybe I might have trouble. And sure enough, I did. I had a streamer. I reached up and grabbed the riser, shook him real hard, and boom, the darn thing went up there and opened up. So there I'm sitting under this weird-looking canopy. I pulled the center line down, and I didn't increase the speed that much. So that blew my theory all to heck. It was worthless. So when I got on the ground, I gave it up. But Ed Noon's come running up to me when I got on the ground. He said, my gosh, Purvis, had you considered using your parachute? I said, the thought had entered my mind. And I gave that up. But I made a lot of jumps there. We made water jumps. I've won several events. In fact, I have a deal here that I hit the first dead center with the cheapo at Calistoga in a meet. Later we jumped up at Moscowite Corners, and this was a sad story. There were four of us, myself, Purvis, Dino Pierce, Jan Pruitt, and Gary Picard. Now Gary Picard was killed on the jump. He was the only one that hadn't had that much experience, but he was jumping a paracommander for the third time. And Bob Gray had told him to take that lanyard off, the one that, you know, when you released your main and opened the reserve. He said, take that off. If you need to use the reserve, you just pull that ripcord. Don't worry about the other. Well, I don't know what happened, although paracommanders have a tendency to fold in the front when they first open, and then they open out. I don't know what happened, but I just know that after the four of us got together, I opened up, turned around, looked down, and there's this parachute by this county road, and I knew right away something was wrong. Well, he never did pull his reserve, and he went head first into the ground. I had to stay there until the coroner showed up. Well, eventually I moved back up into Oregon and started jumping with the Beagle Sky Ranch. I occasionally made it down to the Boatnik. I've jumped into the Boatnik celebration. Every year they start the famous Boatnik celebration at Grants Pass, and they put an inner tube out there by the bridge, just a car inner tube. My sister was with some guy standing on the bank down there, and she bet this guy, he said, I'll bet the next guy jumps out, he hits the inner tube. And he says, you're on, I'll bet you $100. And she says, you're on. Well, she's the gutsy girl. She didn't have the $100 to pay if I lost, but I put both feet through the inner tube, and I have a picture of that. So that's just one. In the Pear Blossom Festival, and that's pretty well known, I jumped into to start the race. I had to jump down through these trees and power lines and buildings and land right there by the starting point of the Pear Blossom Festival. Some guy runs up to me and he says, how in the world can you jump that high, come down through those power lines, trees, and buildings and land right here? I told him, well, it's very simple. It's the fear of landing anywhere else. There was one other jump that I got a kick out of. I was managing the airport restaurant in Medford, and this kid that was flying a plane, a spot plane for the Forest Service, he was swimming in our swimming pool at the apartment complex. There was a two-story building on both sides and a swimming pool in the middle. And he asked me, he said, can you land in this swimming pool? And I said, oh yeah, I think I could. And he thought he'd seize the moment, so he wanted to bet me some money. So I took him up on it. Well, a few days went by. We were both busy doing something. But he pulled up to the restaurant one day when it was quiet, and he come running in. He said, when are you going to take me up on that bet? I thought, I'm going to shut this kid up now. So I said, how about right now? Oh, okay. I said, just a minute. I have to go back here to the back and make a phone call. So I called the city manager, and I told him what I was going to do. Of course, I lied to him. I told him I was going to land in this big field out back. But anyway, the kid picked me up, and away we went. Well, he had a young guy in the airplane with him that was watching, and pretty soon this young kid told him, he said, he landed right in the middle of the swimming pool. And this George Morris, who wanted to make the jump with me, but he was busy at the time, so he didn't. I don't think he could have hit the field, let alone the pool. But anyway, he made a point to run up to the guy later, and he told him, let that teach you a lesson. He says, never bet a man at his own game. I always got a kick out of that. And I jumped on several jumps at Paris, Elsinore, Steve Fielding's 30 Ways in Paris, which was an awful lot of fun. And Moorhead, I jumped on his SOSs a few times. I really have enjoyed the sport over the years, and I hope I didn't bore you to death, but I do want to really give thanks to all those people that have participated that are still alive at my age. I'll be 80 years old the year after next, and I plan on being on the record jump of 80 years and older. So Moorhead, watch out, I'll be there. Thanks a lot, guys.